The NFL is finally back, as is fantasy football and gambling. We get you set for week one with our top free agent finds, best bets, and more next on the IBT podcast.
I've been going dummy, out of bounds, putting on a clinic. Stick around, carrots in my hardware. KC, caught him in the crosshair. Look at me, been the guy calling Mr. MVP. Keep your ass on the bench by my MPC. Earn my stripes like I fixed this league. Your dog's on the turf, my dog's in the street. You can find me somewhere in between. Never a dull moment like a movie scene. About to do the ops like I did this beat. Let them keep talking RG3. Coming to you live. This is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right. It is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. This is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, your place for both a refreshing and feel-good take on fantasy football and NFL gambling. Welcome in, everybody. We did it. Take a bow. Professional football in all its glory is back in action this week, and we're just three idiots who get to talk about it on the internet. I'm your host, Seth Wilcock. Sad to see the summer go, but I'll be honest, I absolutely thrive in the fall. Today, I'm joined by an incredible group of human beings, fantasy football and entertainment betting personality, Boston's boy, Steve Lawson. How we doing, Steve?
Doing great, Seth. Can't wait to get another show going. I'm always like to be here.
Glad to have you back in, as always, man. And also joined by who some refer to him as the intern of this particular program, back in school, Will Big Ripper Star Lipper. Will, how is school? What have you learned in classes so far? And how many beers have you deleted?
A little too many. I mean, we've been here 2 weekends, and honestly, I've been getting too excited for NFL. We got NFL Thursday night and Friday night, so now I have an excuse to stay in and watch some football, take a break from the beers. So I'm ready for that, to be honest.
Absolutely. We have a loaded program tonight in the scope, our fantasy draft leftovers, waivers a week early, whatever you want to call it. Then we'll get into some short things, sleepers of the week, some end of bench plays that you can put into your lineup here if you need it in week one. And then we'll get into some between bets, our favorite bets of the weekend as well. And then from the forum, we'll answer your questions in the chat and also from the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Also back in the saddle with us tonight, one of the veterans of this company, Ginger Yinzer, fan favorite, producer Kyle Scott. Kyle, how are the vibes out there in Pittsburgh, my friend? Every person in that city's emotions are about to be a ride over the next 5 months as they follow the Steelers.
Yeah, man, we are done with the Pirates for good. It's over. Football season has started. And you know what? People are saying, the word on the street is Pittsburgh is the new San Diego. It's 75 for the next week here. So, hey now. Pittsburgh is the new tourist destination of the world.
Hey, we might get the NFL draft there in a couple of years as well. The U.S. Open will be there next year as well. Vibes are high out in Pittsburgh. We'll see how it lasts with Russell Wilson at quarterback, though. Also, want to shout out the IBT family. Thank you so much for tuning in all off season long, listening to everything and watching everything we put out. We greatly appreciate it. We got some of those people in the chat already. Albert hanging out with us. What's up, Albert? Good to see you, buddy. As always, saying good evening, IBT. We got Dame overboard as well. Hello, IBT crew. Good evening to you, Dame, as well. Hope you're ready for a great action-packed week one of the fantasy football season. We're trying to hit 1,300 subscribers by the end of this month. It'd be fucking sick to get there. If you guys can help us, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy this type of content. If we can do better some way too, let us know in the comments. I'd love to read them. Steve won't read them. I will definitely read them. I'll tell you that much, though. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into it here with a little bit of In the Scope.
Requesting permission to engage.
In the Scope.
All right, this is In the Scope, our waivers a week early segment. Who will be the biggest waiver wire claims following week one that we can get for free right now? Last year in this episode, no pressure on us, boys, but I did call out Puka Nacua ahead of week one in this segment. So we'll start with the mainstream targets. These are the guys that still probably don't have to spend any fab on or waiver priority at this time of year. But some guys that other folks are talking about in the industry. And then we'll get to our more below the surface in the scope targets. I want to start first at the quarterback position, the one guy out there, Baker Mayfield. And then we have a slew of running backs here, Jaleel McLaughlin, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Wright, all kind of very under rostered in my opinion, still somewhere between that 40 and 20% mark. And then at wide receiver, some guys who you need to be paying attention to. We'll talk about a couple of these guys later in the show as well. Khalil Shakir, only owned in 48% of leagues. Rashid Shaheed, 44% of leagues. Dontavian Wicks from the Packers. It's going to be a mess out there figuring out this Packers wide receiver core. We've talked about it a ton, but Wicks is a talented player, should be rostered. Michael Wilson of the Cardinals and Andre Isovas. We don't know what's happening with Jamar Chase out there. He is the slot receiver for the Bengals currently, a Joe Burrow favorite as a rookie. So maybe we see Isovas out there getting a little more extra targets. Will, looking at this mainstream list, the Bakers, the Dowdles, the Khalils, the internet has been abuzz with these players all week. Is there one that sticks out to you as like, hey, I'm making room on my roster for this guy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple here that I'm like, that's definitely like clicked a little star when I play on Yahoo Fantasy, the little watch list. But there's two here that stand out to me that I think should be on a roster in every league. And the first one is Jalen Wright.
Okay.
It goes with obviously how nuts this backfield was last year. You had HN was top 5 in points per game. Raheem Mostert was top 5, 20-plus touchdowns. There's just way too many points scored in this offense. And Raheem Mostert stayed fairly healthy last year. Off the top of my head, he might have missed a game or two, but that was one of the most healthy seasons he's had.
Yeah.
But let's look at his history, right? He's a pretty injury-prone running back. Got hurt all the time in San Francisco. We know that HN, unfortunately, is as well. And Mike McDaniel's been very vocal about it doesn't matter if he has 1, 2, maybe 3 running backs. Like, why not 3? So I'm not even saying he's going to be valuable and they're all 3 going to be good. But one of these guys goes down and he could be the Devon Achane of last year or the red zone guy for like Raheem Mostert. Like, he's got a ton of upside here. And the other guy is Khalil Shakir. The way that I view the Buffalo receivers, like, I'm trying to think, the Kyron Williams news that came out that he's returning punts, and you got one side saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter what, like, don't knock him down at all," and then you got the other side saying that's horrible news, like, knock him down 10 spots. Let's be honest, we have no idea what the hell that means, and that's how I view both the Texans and the Buffalo Bills receiving cores.
Okay,
and I think Khalil Shakir, I think there's tons of upside, like. He was first in so many metrics, out-targeted, or he had better stats than Stephon Diggs in the last 10 weeks last season. He was the guy they went to in the playoffs, and I know they added a couple of pieces here, but we have no idea. This could be the wide receiver one in this offense, so it's surprising to see him on waivers.
Yeah, 48.4% roster. I'll talk a little bit more about Shakir, but I'm absolutely there with you, man. I think he should be rostered everywhere. Steve, aside from the Jalen Wrights, the Shakirs of the world, is there anyone else on this mainstream target list that you're like, hey, I got to get down on them potentially here ahead of week 1?
Honestly, I think it's Michael Wilson for the Arizona Cardinals. For me, he's just somebody he's very talented, and we saw it last year. He was able to make
Stanford as well.
He's what?
We saw it at Stanford as well.
Yeah, right? Like, so he's put it up. We've seen it on tape. He got a good rapport going with Kyler Murray last year. Yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. is there. And yes, Greg Dortch is going to get his love from the media. But you know what? Greg Dortch and Seth loves to like tout the Greg Dortch whatever.
He's on the thumbnail tonight. He's on the thumbnail. We'll talk about him. Don't you worry.
That's great. He's about the same size as our thumbnail, which is a problem in the NFL if you're a wide receiver. So, like, you don't want – listen, Michael Wilson's a physical freak, right? So there's a real chance that he is their red zone target. He's big, he's strong, good route runner, and he's built a rapport with Kyler Murray. I think Michael Wilson could truly emerge as the number 2 in that offense and command upwards of 100 targets.
17.8% rostered for Michael Wilson, so I think he's worth at least a look here. I do want to move into our in the scope targets, though. These are the more players that you can kind of get for free. No one's really looking at, maybe won't even be looking at going into next week. They're very under the surface. Paul Miller, what's up, my buddy? Good to see you, as always, in the program. I'll start with you, Will. What are you looking at here, man? Who's someone that no one's talking about that maybe we should be?
This was, I went through a few different guys here, and honestly, for the other guys, I had all these like crazy stats that backed it up, but I had to go with my gut. And Jalen Polk here, to see that he's 30% owned is a little crazy. And I snagged him in the last few rounds of like almost all of my like home league drafts. I think this is a guy that's going to be the clear wide receiver one for the Patriots offense. And this isn't like last year where, like obviously we're not expecting him to be good, but we knew Mac Jones wasn't good. We knew Bailey Zappi wasn't good. Jacoby Brissett's he's at least serviceable, but like we don't know how good Drake May is going to be. And every year there's that one offense, and I'm not even saying it's going to be the Patriots, but every year there's that offense where rookies come in and surprise, like the Texans last year. The Buccaneers wasn't really rookies, but they were super undervalued last year. Like there's always an offense like that. And I'm not even trying to say I'm betting on the Patriots offense, but Jalen Polk is a talent that I am betting on. And aside from that, I like Drake May as a prospect, but he's the more talented. Like Pop Douglas was super serviceable to throw in your wide receiver 3 last season, but I think Jalen Polk is a guy that's going to come out, possibly have 8 targets, 7 catches for 80-something yards and a touchdown in week 1 and be the number 1 waiver target.
I think that's a good look there, man. Honestly, like Jalen Polk could potentially be that wide receiver 1 as in New England, as you alluded to. Like we saw Kendrick Bourne kind of be that guy after week 1 and 2, people were kind of clamoring to get. So maybe that's Jalen Polk here this season. He comes out of Washington, has a lot of hype around him. Steve, you're up in that Boston area. What are you hearing about Polk up there?
I listen, you know what? I think it's a crapshoot in New England. Things are going not great. Let's just say that for this offense. Overall, reports out of camp are that Drake May hasn't even separated himself as the best quarterback there. Joe Milton's really putting like work in to like as that backup. He was more electric. Like
May looked good in his last 2 preseason games.
He looked fine. I mean, listen, you know what? Is Jalen Polk potentially the number 1? Yeah, maybe, but it could be Demario Douglas as well, or it could be really anybody. And when Kendrick Bourne comes back, it might be him. Listen, I think this is a cool like reach, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm avoiding that team altogether outside of their 2 running backs. And even at that, I'm not thrilled about it.
You and your Antonio Gibson love.
Always.
A tale as old as time there. Will, I like the call. I'll be honest. I like it a lot. I don't like it as much as this other player, though. I'm going to shout out Greg Dortch. Steve alluded to him earlier. He's 1.2% rostered here. And last season under Drew Petzing, when Kyler Murray came back, he only played 8 games. They were still a pretty decent offense. Arizona in general, 17th in plays per game, 19th in yards per game. I also think that they're going to take a jump here this year with Kyler fully healthy. They got Marvin there as well. I think they'll be a top 15, maybe a top 12 offense. So I'm like suddenly, now that drafts are happening, I got a couple more happening. Do you guys have any more drafts happening? I have 1 more tomorrow night.
I'm in the middle of 2.
Okay.
Okay.
So like all of a sudden, like as drafts have come, I've been targeting Cardinals just because I feel like they're a really good discount. Their opening schedule this season: Bills, Rams, Lions, Commanders, 49ers, Packers, Chargers, Dolphins, Bears. Like they're going to have to score. This defense is still fucking cheeks, honestly, as well. I'm projecting Kyler Murray to throw the ball right around 34 times per game. We saw him about 33.5 last season. We've seen him at 35 in years past. Take the middle number, 34 there. Let's say Marv gets half of that. Let's say Trey McBride gets half of that as well, or 25 each. They take 50%. That's about 17 targets per game out there. Maybe it splits up, like Steve is saying, between Michael Wilson, Dortch, the running backs, and no one stands out. I think Dortch could stand out, though. We're just 2 years removed away from Dortch commanding nine or more targets in 5 games. In my opinion, targets are earned. I think Greg Dortch can earn them. I think he also makes the most of them. In that 2022 season, when him and Kyler were on the same page, 81.3% catch rate. You guys remember him as a DFS darling every single week to open the season. I just think we get Kyler Murray back on the field once again. Last season, when he came back, like Dortch wasn't even starting. Dortch was not even playing. He had 1 target the whole season. And then Kyler comes back. He gets 5-6 targets a game a couple times. I think he's Kyler Murray's safety blanket here out of the slot. Will, do you have any love for Greg Dortch here? Any thought that maybe he could be someone you just throw on the end of the bench and maybe he's a flex here and there?
Yeah, I mean, he was somebody that, best ball season was a nice pick for me towards, the last few rounds. I'm more of a Michael Wilson guy personally, and last year I was huge on him last year. And he there were a few weeks there where he was at the top of the waiver wire. He made a name for himself, couldn't quite keep it together. But I completely agree with the Cardinals offense. I think will be a uh top of the first half of the league. Their defense horrible, which is awesome for fantasy football offense. I do think all these Cardinals are undervalued.
Sure.
It's obviously going to be the Harrison McBride show. If I personally had to pick another guy to surprise people, I would go with Michael Wilson. But Dortch is one of those guys getting a ton of hype as well. So it's one of those things where it's like if there's going to be someone, it's one of those two. I would bet on Michael Wilson personally, but.
Okay, Steve, you're kind of in that camp too. You just think Wilson, because Wilson is the better prospect. Like, that's not. Dortch was undrafted. Like he doesn't have a great profile. It's just the production he has had in Arizona so far.
And it's not a knock on Greg Dortch. Honestly, I'm kind of out on, not that I don't think they're good. I just think for their price tag, there's almost too many mouths to feed now in Arizona where for fantasy purposes, you're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, James Conner, and Trey Benson now. There are a lot of people who can make plays in Arizona. Plus, Kyler can run the ball as well.
Yeah, good point.
There is a lot going on in Arizona. I think that offense in real football will be significantly better this season. And I think that I've said it on Twitter before. Are we undervaluing the Arizona Cardinals as a team, as a unit? I believe we are. But I think fantasy purposes, like even Marvin Harrison Jr., I saw him go in the early second round of a 10-team draft. That is a big price tag to pay for someone who has never done it at the NFL level and hasn't shown that he can handle the physicality of the game at this level.
Yeah, I feel you there. I totally understand the concern about the price tag you are paying for Marv. I think the rest of them are a good value. I'm still maybe not the early second round of a 10-teamer, but I've been clicking the button around 14 or 15 in a 12-teamer. So
in a 12-teamer, round 14, 15, Greg Dortch is a great pick because you know what? There will be that week that he does Greg Dortch things. And one thing this man refuses to do is get tackled. Like, get him in space. And I was shocked that they did not transition him to running back because he just profiles that way.
Sure. We got Tyler in the chat. What's up, IBT crew? Good to see you,
Hi,
Tyler. Appreciate it, man. We got Paul as well saying Eckler is going to be a great surprise this season. I can't believe I got him in round 8. I'm more in that B-Rob camp. I do have a little Eckler exposure. You got any Eckler exposure or B-Rob exposure, Will?
I'm a B-Rob guy personally.
Okay.
I'm
Same.
off Eckler. I understand the upside, but
yeah,
I'm going B-Rob.
Yeah, same there. Dynasty World Fantasy Football saying Seth is that dude. Who do you like out of the New England wide receiver group? If you have to choose one, I know not ideal. Well, we just kind of went over this a couple minutes ago. Will laid out his case for Jalen Polk here. So I think Polk would probably be my favorite as well. I think maybe not in a full redraft, but I wouldn't mind in some type of league to maybe have a little bit of exposure to DeMario Douglas. I don't think he has the upside, but he's a safety blanket. So I think either one of those is a fine pick, but I think Polk, as Will alluded to about 10 minutes ago here in the program, DWFF, that Polk is probably the guy to have. All right, Steve, we got you, man. What do you have for us here for your inaugural In the Scope target on the IBT podcast?
Yeah, I'm going with someone who has basically been written off after his bad rookie season, and that's Quentin Johnston out in LA for the Chargers. This man, you know what? His profile, his athletic profile is good. He's big. He's strong. He's pretty fast for a big guy like that. Listen, it was not pretty last season. Just wasn't. Yeah, you know what? Last year he couldn't. He had a bit of the yips. He was dropping a lot of passes, but you know what? There's a guy. He's currently in Carolina, but he made his name up in Yinzer County for you guys, who put up some numbers, but was really kind of getting dogged for dropping the ball. And I'm, of course, referring to Deontay Johnson. Oh, yeah. It happens. There are guys who drop passes. Do you know who led the NFL in drops last year?
I don't.
Tyreek Hill.
Well, he's getting 500 targets.
So, that's what I'm saying. But let's ease it on the drops, right? So everyone wants to overvalue drops, but Quentin Johnston, like, who else is going to catch the ball there, right? They traded Keenan Allen. Listen, Ladd McConkey hasn't even separated himself as the number one yet. And Jim Harbaugh has come out with pretty glowing praise for Quentin Johnston overall, and says he's a weapon for this offense. And you know what? I'm going to trust his word on this until he proves otherwise. Someone has to do it. I think there's the talent there to make that second year leap. Here's what I will say. The athletic profile shows that he has what it takes to be a wide receiver in this league. If he can learn to catch with his hands and not his body,
right,
that will be the difference maker for Quentin Johnston. If he does that, this man could go for 1,000 to 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns this season.
I don't know if anyone can go for 1,000 yards in this offense because it's going to be slow paced. That is my concern. It's a Greg Roman offense. We haven't seen a ton of 1,000 yard receivers come out of it. So like that is why I'm out on Quentin Johnston. Like, you can say what you want from a talent perspective for me, Will, but I just don't want much to do with this passing game outside of maybe a Ladd share here or there, because I just think it's going to be so slow paced. With that being said, though, 4.3% roster. I am shocked by that number.
I don't see any hope for him personally. He was absolutely horrible last year. And I agree that the drops thing, you see a couple of viral drops clips and everyone's like, oh, he's horrible, all this stuff. Drops really just don't matter. I mean, we saw it with Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson. Like, it's overblown for sure. I do think it's slightly alarming, when he's horrible for a whole year, and then we're seeing more clips of it in the second season. Personally, don't really care about the Harbaugh comment, gassing him up. I mean, we see that all the time with, the Ravens are trying to do it with Rashad Bateman. I don't think Harbaugh is too reliable from a coach speak term. Like, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that clip of them asking about Herbert's injury, and he just sort of rambled for 30 seconds and just literally said absolutely nothing.
You can ask him about his injuries. He'll tell you about his injuries, but he won't tell you about the players.
Well, I think that's different, though, right? I think that's indicative of where he's at with Johnson, right? He spoke around the Herbert injury. He was very direct about his praise for Quentin Johnston. He won't say what he doesn't want to, but he'll tell you what he wants you to know.
He couldn't possibly have had more of an opportunity last year. And I know, Keenan Allen goes down for 5 games. Mike Williams is out for more than half the year. Austin Eckler goes down. Josh Palmer went down too. There was literally everything you could have possibly asked for. Elite quarterback, pass-heavy offense, hella garbage time. And obviously people change in their second season. But when you group Quentin Johnston with all these receivers that were that bad in their first season, it's just a really bad company to be a part of. But personally, I don't think the Chargers are going to be as run heavy as people think, because I personally don't think they're going to be as good. And, where their defense is bad, other teams are putting up points. So I do personally think this team is going to pass more. So I understand that point. But I'm a huge Josh Palmer guy. I think this passing offense is going to be Palmer and Ladd McConkey.
Sick. Awesome. Chandler, I see you got a couple questions coming here through the chat, man. We'll get to those here towards the end of the show and from the forum. If you can hang out with us for a little bit, man. Hope you're having a great Tuesday as well, man. Cheers. Guys, I love it. I love the banter. We're gonna figure out if QJ is a guy or not here in just a couple of days. So we'll figure that out then. In the meantime, I do want to get into some short things. Sleepers of the week presented by our friends over at Trophy Smack. Man, Trophy Smack has been absolutely hooking us up this offseason. We got a huge belt for draft night out. We gave one away already at the event. We got custom championship rings from them for the league winners as well. Here's a little more about Trophy Smack. Very thankful for their partnership this summer as we had that great event unfold earlier this August.
This is what a winner looks like, buddy. Countless hours of studying the game, watching the game, and honoring the game. Only one man can come out on top. Imagine having last year's fantasy team immortalized. Imagine walking into this year's draft party with this hog of a trophy. Trophy Smack changed the fantasy football awards game. However you want, the trophy is how you'll get the trophy. That includes free engravings for all past and future winners. They also have a sweet draft kit that delivers an epic in-person draft experience. Patrick Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase. Ever heard of them? Well, they're all in the kit. Shop Trophy Smack today and get your league something legendary to compete over.
There you go. Get yourself a hog of a trophy out there at trophysmack.com. Appreciate their partnership this summer. Let's jump into some sure things, sleepers of the week.
It's the sure thing. Sleepers of the week.
All right, we're heading to the shore one more time this summer as we transition into the month of September. This is our segment where we're looking at some bench players, maybe some waiver wire plays for week one that could have a big game. These can also be DFS plays, also people maybe we're interested in betting player props on as well. Because I will say, like right now, your roster is probably as loaded as it's going to get. Knock on wood here, but we haven't had too many injuries so far this season. So we might not need to play these guys, but they're guys we're looking at potentially sticking into our lineup in a larger league or, gambling on or playing in DFS as well. So, Steve, I'm going to turn over to you here first, man. Who's your sure thing sleeper of the week for week number uno?
So for me, a sleeper, and he shouldn't be a sleeper anymore because he's been doing it for so long. It's Taysom Hill. This man he's the Swiss Army knife of football players. And the Saints have shown time and time again through multiple coaching regimes that this man will be involved in the offense. Listen, Johnston just didn't earn that starting spot last year, and it seemed like Taysom Hill usurped him as the year went on. I wouldn't be surprised to see him doing more this year than Johnston does at the tight end position. You're obviously going to see him in the goal line situations, those read options with Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
He may even throw a pass or two. You have so many different ways to get points out of Taysom Hill, and he's always dirt cheap on like early season DFS squads. I think he's worth the flyer because no one else in the league do you have three different ways to score a touchdown with. It's just he's one of a kind.
If you absolutely punted the position, if you're in a 12 or a 14 team league, I don't mind ripping Taysom Hill out there. It's a little risky here in week one, Will, not knowing the true usage of him. But let's be honest, Kendre Miller's injured. We're not going to see Kendre Miller here this week. They do have Jamal Williams in the backfield, but I think we could see, maybe 6 to 7 carries for Taysom Hill. What do you think for in your projections, Will?
Yeah. No, this is a guy that's finished top 12 at the tight end position 3 of the past 4 years. And the only other year he only played 12 games, which is probably why. And I think if there were a year for Taysom Hill, it's this one, because who else do they have outside of Chris Olave at receiver? You got the dump offs going to Alvin Kamara. Yeah. The next option in the offense is going to be Taysom Hill, whether people like it or not. And honestly, the goal line, Jamal Williams is still there and annoying. We've seen how much Kendre Miller is hated by Dennis Allen and how much Taysom Hill is loved by Dennis Allen. And to be honest, he's a great goal line back. So, and just like you said, I was in a 12-man home league draft, and not the brightest group of people, but they all were just reaching 3-4 rounds on tight ends, and I refused to do that. I'm like, I just waited till the end and I took Taysom Hill because he's probably going to be top 12 again.
I hope your league mates do not listen to this program.
I hope they do.
The trash talk is starting, and it's starting early.
Yeah, I like it. You got to take swings, and that's a swing there with Taysom Hill, but a popular one on this program. Let us know in the chat or in the comments, guys. Do you like Taysom Hill this week? Are you willing to get ballsy here with the Swiss Army knife of the NFL, as Steve called him? Will, thrown over to you, man. Where are you going here in week number one with your sure thing sleeper of the week?
It's Will Levis for the Titans, and this is just something that I kind of came upon in kind of mid, June. I would say June. This is a guy that I latched myself onto, and it's not someone you need to draft. He's probably not going to be drafted. Obviously, in best ball, he's a nice start throw, but for redraft, he'll be there on the waiver wire. But I think there's going to be a point in the season, whether it's week 1, 2, 3, where the passing volume is just too good to ignore. And the Titans, they hired Brian Callahan, offensive coordinator from Cincinnati, super pass heavy. They signed Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd to pair with DeAndre Hopkins, which is a very solid trio at wide receiver. And I think another thing that goes overlooked, obviously we know that Tajay Spears was top 12 in every running back receiving metric last season. Tony Pollard is just as good as a receiving back. And I feel like everything I heard out of those two, of Pollard and Spears, everything I heard out of them was how good of receiving backs they are. Nothing about rushing. And if you look at all the projections of season stats, pretty much every projection you look at, the Titans are projected to be top 5 in passing. They have been very vocal about it. Passing attempts, they're going to be very pass heavy, and they're going to be among the bottom of the league in rushing. And their defense is pretty good as well. But I think that this is going to be beautiful garbage time fantasy points for fantasy football. And my comparison here is Sam Howell last season led the league in passing attempts, was benched, was horrible. You don't need to be good, but he's just slinging the shit out of the football all week, every week. He finished as QB 12 overall, despite getting benched, being horrible. I don't even like Will Levis could be good. I'm a Colts fan. I hope he's not. I don't think he's going to be good, but I don't think he needs to be good to be rostered in fantasy football come week 3.
I only worry about him here in week 1 specifically because of the Bears. It's going to be a tough pass rush coming for him. We know Sweat will be on the move. The secondary for Chicago can always be a little, I think, suspect. Under this regime, it hasn't been great, but I do worry. I actually think the Bears are going to be a good defense. So I know that's a low total on the week as well. So I don't know if I can send out Levis this week. He's got the Jets and the Packers coming up next. So, but I do like it. Like, I do like this banana eating, mayo eating son of a bitch. Like, I do like him. I've always had, like, let's not forget, let's turn back the page when Will was in 9th grade. Will Levis was a Penn State guy. Will Levis was supposed to be the chosen one for our Nittany Lions, ends up transferring to Kentucky there because Sean Clifford, of course, had to have the starting reins for 5 years there in Happy Valley. But I like Levis. I just worry about the defenses he's going to face here early in the season, specifically in week 1. Steve, do you worry about that Chicago front coming after him as well? It's a lot of patchwork on this offensive line. They've changed a lot. They've gotten better. They continue to draft offensive linemen in the first round, but it is young guys out there.
I actually worry about the fact that, they built up their pass attack quite a bit. The problem is they did it in a weird way for a guy like Will Levis, where the Titans may well have the slowest wide receiving core in the NFL. You have a guy with an absolute bazooka on his arm, and you went and got a bunch of possession receivers for him. What should have happened was you should have gone and signed a bunch of speedsters like Hollywood Brown to stretch the field, because Will Levis, I don't think, has the accuracy at the NFL level to kind of just matriculate down the field on these long 8, 9, 10, 11 play drives.
Yeah,
and that's what that offense is going to need to do, because it's Calvin Ridley, it's DeAndre Hopkins, who's up there in age now, and Tyler Boyd. These are chain movers. These are guys who are more of those like in between kind of 5 to 15 yard plays. I don't know if that's Will Levis's strength. So I do worry about that. I do like the running backs. I like that he has pass catching running backs. I think one thing with Will Levis that we're overlooking is he's athletic. He's more athletic than you think he is. And he's a big, strong guy. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a few rushing touchdowns this year. Maybe that bolsters him. I don't hate the idea of him being a sleeper, but I am very, very, very nervous that offense is going to sputter and fail because he can't dissect a defense like that.
In week 1, Will, gun to the head, would you rather play in this game Caleb Williams against the Titans or Will Levis against the Bears, you think?
Oh, I would go Caleb there. I think Caleb has a lot safer of a floor than people realize, even as a rookie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'm going to shift over to my sure thing sleeper of the week here. It is Khalil Shakir. We brought him up earlier. He is the most disrespected player in fantasy football right now. Wide receiver 57 in ESPN rankings. I think that's absurd. And you don't have to start him this week, probably, but I will be looking for him in the prop market. I'll be playing him in DFS, and I do have one of those crazy leagues. I think we start 5 wide receivers. I think he's my wide receiver 4 in that league, and I feel fine about it. Cardinals and Bills on the slate, the 4th highest total this week, 48.5 points projected there. The Cardinals are starting Sean Murphy-Bunting, who Eric threw a little shade on a couple weeks ago, and second rounder Max Melton at cornerback here. I think there's going to be some growing pains for this DB room. They have very experienced safeties, not so much at the cornerback position. Shakir is listed as the slot wide receiver. However, he has been playing in the 2 wide receiver sets this offseason. Mac Hollins, I hate to tell you, Keon Coleman truthers, please stand up, Steve. I know you were one of them. Mac Hollins is starting at that X role. He's going to play that same fucking Gabe Davis role where he blocks and he runs down the field straight. Curtis Samuel, he is listed as a starting Z. He's got turf toe already. I don't think he's going to get a full dose right off the rip here in week 1. if you're playing a Buffalo Bills pass catcher this week, it's Dalton Kincaid first and foremost. He's going to fucking eat here. And it is Khalil Shakir. They both have their relationships with Josh Allen. Will said it down the stretch in the playoffs late in the season when they needed something. They went to this guy. So he's still out there in over 50% of leagues. I am signing up to play him where I have to and where I need him this week. Khalil Shakir, guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Khalil Shakir. As far as the Mac Hollins thing, before our listeners kind of like take that advice and run with it, please don't roster Mac Hollins.
No, I'm not saying that. Yeah,
he's not going to be the starter for long. Keon Coleman's learning the NFL. He'll be the starter by week 3. I mean, let's be real. He's a much better prospect. He's faster. He's bigger. He's stronger.
Mac Hollins doesn't wear shoes though. He's got no shoes. He's dope, man.
Mac Hollins is trash. Like, he had like 4 good games and like has ridden that for like 3 years. Like, it's just
that's not. Yeah, that's true.
I think Khalil Shakir is definitely a good pick. I think he's clearly the most the number 1 wide receiver there right this second. And I think defense. I don't want to knock Dalton Kincaid because I don't want to be like the negative guy on this show. But like, everyone's talking about Dalton Kincaid like he's Travis Kelce 2.0. Like, we haven't seen that yet. It hasn't happened yet. And until I see him really dominate, I'm not ready to crown him anything. Now, I've seen Shakir do some stuff. I've seen him make some noise. Until Kincaid does that, I'd say he's the number 3 option known in Buffalo right now behind Shakir and James Cook.
What do you think, Will? How do you dissect this Buffalo Bills offense heading into week 1? Do you think Shakir, if you are throwing someone out at that wide receiver position, it is that third-year player coming in, maybe a potential third-year breakout as well?
Yeah, I said that this was one of the like receiving cores that I wasn't super like quick to make an opinion on, but because I like both Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. I've never been in on Keon Coleman. I think that everything that came out about him throughout the entire summer, training camp, all that stuff was how raw he is, how long it's going to take. In my opinion, he's the non-injured Jonathan Brooks. Like, if you're drafting him and you're waiting for week 7 or 8 to see if he can become the wide receiver 1 or something. I don't think you're going to get much from him at the beginning of the year. And I said before, like, Shakir was the guy that earned the targets in the last 10 games of last season. He allowed Josh Allen to have the best quarterback rating in the NFL when targeted, and he was top 3 in fantasy points per target. I think it's a guy Josh Allen could rely on, and I get the Kincaid thing as well. Like, he showed so many flashes, and I think he has one of the clearest paths to tight end 1. However, it was like 2 weeks of 80 yards and a touchdown or 2, and then it was 3 catches for 38 yards. And I get a weird feeling about Dawson Knox being there. I do think Shakir has a decent chance to lead this receiving room in targets.
Perfect. Love it, guys. Love it. Mr. Scamper's checking in the chat. What's up, Scampers? Good to see you, man. Saying, evening, IBT fam. Football is so close. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I cannot wait. And Scamper's also saying obligatory Curtis Samuel wide receiver 1 plug for me. Yeah, you and our guy Tyler Bradley over there, good friend of the show, have been hyping him up, driving that price all off season in best ball. Jorge, I see you got a question, man. Thanks so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to get to your question here in just a little bit. We're going to get through our between bets, one best bet for each of us, and then we're going to get to everyone's questions in the chat. Appreciate everyone making time for us here this Tuesday. Let's go ahead and jump in some NFL gambling here on the program. Between bets. Between bets. Between bets, our favorite bets of NFL week number 1. And I'll be honest, boys, college football week 1 was good to the kid. I was swinging a hot bat 4-0 in my picks last weekend. Can I keep it going? Can we keep it going into the pro level here? I hope so. Steve, I'm coming to you first, man. Whether it's against the spread, totals, props, what are you looking at here? What's the one line that you're like, hey, maybe that's a little bit of a misprice. Maybe the IBT family, as well as myself, should get invested with that?
Yeah, so early in the season, I don't like to go with prop betting too often because you just don't know what's going to happen until things really settle down and you know what teams look like. It's hard to really know what's going to be what, right? But for me, I went against the spread and I like Miami against Jacksonville. They are -3. So the Dolphins have to give 3 points to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who do not have a defense that is poised to compete with this offense.
Yeah.
They don't have a significant pass rush. They don't have star cornerbacks. There's not much that I'm looking at in terms of the Jaguars that makes me feel like they can keep up with the speed of the Miami Dolphins. We've seen that Mike McDaniel has this team ready to go, and he always does, and he's going to come out chucking. I wouldn't be shocked if Miami blows the doors off the Jaguars this week. So -3, I have them at as a 10-point favorite personally against the Jaguars. So I am very, very, very comfortable getting this pick in and putting the money down on the Miami Dolphins to cover the spread.
Laying 3 here on the Miami Dolphins is Steve. I don't hate the call here. I almost like, I think I think it is the highest total on the weekend or one of them. I don't mind hitting the over here, if I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if I can pick a true spread because I think the Miami defense is just as bad as this Jacksonville defense, honestly. Like, Jalen Ramsey did not look like himself last season. I know he's kind of recovering from injury. Holland didn't look like the cornerback we had seen as well earlier in his career. So I don't know if I can tail you on this. I'm not fading this at all. I think more than anything, I like the total in this game. Will, your thoughts here on Miami versus Jacksonville in week 1?
Well, my favorite point that Seth made was, like, wait a couple weeks till I start doing the spreads here. We don't know a whole bunch yet. But I do think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. Miami starts off super hot every single season. We saw them blow the doors off the Broncos in week 3 of last season. And the shootout against the Chargers in week 1. They had a 42-38 game against the Ravens the year before in one of the first 2 weeks. Like, they start out hot. They're going to put up a ton of points. And I do think the Jaguars can keep up with them. I like this new passing attack, a healthy Trevor Lawrence with the weapons they added, huge Brian Thomas guy. But I would back up the -3 here. I think that the Dolphins can win this by a touchdown, no matter how high scoring it is.
Okay. That over under 249 even is what you can get it over at DraftKings Sportsbook. So I would consider going that as well. Maybe even a little same game parlay. Take Steve's Dolphins favored by 3, back them, and then also go with the over here. Don't hate that call.
I love
Will,
that call.
I know you maybe potentially want to go with the prop betting route, Will. So what are you seeing in the prop market that maybe is an interesting line that maybe shouldn't be out there?
Yeah, the first one that I mean, it's the first game. I've looked into the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Packers and the Eagles the most so far, and as the week goes on, I'll keep digging deep. But prop bets are what I like to go with, and Patrick Mahomes is somebody that's very hard to fade. I took his higher of, I want to say it's 264.5 passing yards, and the past, obviously the AFC Championship against the Ravens, the playoffs, everything is low scoring in the playoffs. It's a different ball game. But regular season, the past 3 times that he's played the Ravens, 340 yards and 3 touchdowns, 384 yards and 3 touchdowns, 374 yards and 3 touchdowns. And now you add Xavier Worthy, you still have Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco. This is one of the best supporting casts. Obviously, having Tyreek Hill was nuts, Hill and Kelce, but as a depth term, Marquise Brown is out, but this is still a loaded receiving core. He's destroyed the Ravens through the air pretty much every time he plays them, except for the last AFC Championship game. And I know it's a new defensive coordinator, but the Chiefs came out and they lost week 1 against the Lions last year. Now, that off the top of my head, I think that was without Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, or at least one of the two. I think the Chiefs are going to come out ready in this one, and Mahomes is going to be slinging that.
Yeah, I honestly think that the new defensive coordinator for Baltimore losing Mike McDonald there actually kind of helps this over potentially go for Patrick Mahomes. I think they can exploit this Baltimore defense. They also lost Patrick Queen in the offseason as well. Like they have a little bit of turnover there in Baltimore. So while usually I'm not super aggressive on the overs of a Thursday night football game early in the season, I think Patrick Mahomes is going to get out there. They're going to want to show off some of these new toys, right? Like they got fucking Xavier Worthy out there. They're going to throw a big FU to Brandon Bean and the Buffalo Bills for letting them get him. So, yeah, I don't hate this call at all. I think you can build a lot of interesting builds off this as well, whether you want to back the Chiefs, whether you want to take I'll probably tail the under here on this Thursday night football game. I usually do week number 1 of the season. But in general, yeah, I do like this call out from our guy, Will. I want to round us out here, guys, with my favorite bet of the week. I hate to say it, but I got to be the old boring guy in the room once again. Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts. I'm taking the under 49.5 here. I just think this is a way too high of total. This is one of the highest of the season so far that we were seeing out there offered right now. This is a week 1 divisional matchup. Keep that in mind. And also, like, I know there's a ton of cool fantasy assets in this game. We got Jonathan Taylor. We got Michael Pittman Jr. AR5 is back there as well. We got CJ Stroud, the new look Texans wide receiver. But let's not forget, the Texans defense is fucking nice too. Derek Stingley is out there holding down the back end. Danielle Hunter gets brought in as well from Minnesota. Will Anderson Jr. expects to take another step as well on this defensive front. And the Colts, they're not the best defensive team in any means. I think that back end is very susceptible. However, they still got quite Kwity Paye and some guys up front that I think can wreck this game a little bit. This is a rivalry game. And let's not forget how the Colts season ended last year. They could have made it if Goodson would have made that catch on 4th down. They're potentially in the playoffs. The Texans aren't. There's a lot of bad blood between these two teams. Head to head, these two teams have hit the under 7 in the last 10 games. I know it's the exciting offenses, but we still have a lot to learn about the Colts. AD Mitchell's in, Josh Downs out to beginning the season. Same with the Texans. Stephon Diggs now locked and loaded for Houston. But what does that mean? How does this work? Same with Joe Mixon. It's not Devin Singletary. So a little bit of turnover here. I think Steichen and D'Amico, they've played each other a couple times. They kind of know what's happening now. So I'm going to take the under here. Steve, would you go with the over? Would you tail the under? Or would it just be a no bet for you?
Ooh, it's a no bet for me, just because, you know what, like, it is a high total for week 1, and that is scary as anything. But these teams have loaded up on their offenses, especially the Houston Texans. Not only did they bring in Stephon Diggs, they brought in Joe Mixon. Like, this team they are coming out to score the raw. You know what I mean? They're gonna. Listen, there is a real world where this game gets played, and the Houston Texans beat the brakes off the Indianapolis Colts. It is a reality that we may be looking at, that the Houston Texans may very well develop into a Super Bowl contender this year. But you know what? You can't count out Anthony Richardson either, because we've never seen him really get going. Yeah. If he stays healthy, I don't know what the fuck the Colts look like, right? Like, because it's Jonathan Taylor, healthy. Anthony Richardson, healthy. Michael Pittman, healthy. True. That's fucking scary. True. That's a 3-headed monster that I don't want to deal with. Now, yes, you have Shane Steichen and D'Amico Ryans going at it. I think they're both defensive-minded coaches.
Steichen offensive.
Was an offensive coordinator. But you know what? D'Amico Ryans is a defensive-minded guy, and that defense, like you said, is fucking nice. I would, if I had to bet, if you put a gun to my head, I'd say take the under. 25 points each is a lot, right? Break this down in NFL terms. This has to be, in real scoring, has to be a 27-24 kind of game to beat the over, like kind of get over. And that just doesn't feel like a week 1 matchup. It just is. It's a lot of scoring for a week 1 matchup.
Divisional matchup here. Will, are you also fading the over, backing the under with myself and Steve, or is this just a no bet? Because, I mean, it is a little ballsy. Like, I am fading some high profile players here coming into their second season as the units they are now.
Yeah, I think honestly, I would say the Texans offense, defense, the Colts offense, defense, pretty uncertain about all of them. And I'm a Colts fan, so take this with a grain of salt or think that I have the best insight ever. But Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, like we haven't seen them together, right? They added Adonai Mitchell to pair with Pittman and Downs. I think that this is a pretty underrated receiving core. Richardson played a quarter against the Texans last year in week 2, scored 2 rushing touchdowns before getting injured. And that game went over. It was 31-20. And then we know the last game of the season, completely different
Barn
teams.
burner. Yeah, barn burner in that one.
Yeah. And I think that the Texans defense, I think everyone loves to talk about their offense, but I really haven't heard much about all the pieces they added on this defense. Like goes under the rug. I think this is going to be a good defense. Colts defense, I don't know what to think because I think they have one of the best front sevens in the NFL. They're absolutely loaded on the defensive line.
Buckner as well, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and even linebackers as well. Zaire is going to be top 5 in tackles. However, their secondary, they were horrible last year, and they didn't do one single thing to help it this season.
Other than get rid of Stephon Gilmore at the end of last season, yeah.
No, that was 2 seasons ago.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right on
He was
that
a
one.
Cowboy
But-
last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the same. Julian Blackmon was injured, and we'll have him back, but it's just not going to be much of a difference maker. So I could see the Texans coming out and just Collins, Diggs, and Dell through the air, just shredding the Colts. But I completely agree with the division rival. Tons of uncertainty, gun to my head. I would probably go the under, but it's not something I'm saying with much confidence.
Okay.
And you want to remember with these early games, this is not a commentary on the talent on the offensive side of the ball. It's just defense is usually ready before offense is because these guys haven't played together, right? Like no one's rolling out their starters during the preseason. So this is their first game action. Like Anthony Richardson has handed off the ball. I don't think he's ever handed the ball off to Jonathan Taylor.
I don't know if they did get a game at all.
Like that's
together,
a crazy thing to think about.
Two
like
snaps.
2 snaps. So like
yeah.
Your read options take a lot of time and it's different in the game. So until I see it, I just think the under is a safer play.
Good point. I like it, guys. I like it a lot. Those are our best bets for the week. Let's go ahead and round out the program here with a little bit of From the Forum.
If you're up, stuck, think about what to do. Here in between, we got advice for you. Back and forth all day, trying to pick the play. Let's hear what them boys here had to say. Presented by the Fantasy Football Advice Network.
All right. Want to shout out the Fantasy Football Advice Network as always for powering this segment. If you guys want a community that's just about fantasy football, none of the other BS happening out there on the internet, check out the Fantasy Football Advice Network. They have a snazzy app that you can download, the Fantasy Sports Advice Network, or head over to fantasyfootballadvice.com. Get interacting with us over there, the IBT family, and everyone over there in the community. It's a great community. I appreciate everything they do to help power us over here at IBT. I want to get to a couple questions in the chat before we get to some questions over there from the forum. First one here is from our guy Chandler early in the show. Appreciate you, Chandler. Bench 1, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Rashee Rice, and Chris Olave. Wow, this is a really loaded core. What do you think, Will? You're high on the Chiefs on Monday night here. So Thursday night. I don't think I can fade Rashee Rice against a new look Baltimore defense. But I mean, it's hard to bench any of these other guys as well.
I would bench Deebo, and it's the Jets defense. Mike Evans against the Commanders. Their secondary was horrible last year. This could be 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rashee Rice as the number 1 option against. I just hyped up taking Patrick Mahomes is over without Hollywood Brown there. Obviously, there's still Kelsey. I think Rashee Rice was one of the best values, and he's in my lineup for week 1. Chris Olave against the Panthers, not a very good defense. Like I said, Olave is one of those guys where it might just be him and Taysom Hill with the dump offs to Kamara. Deebo, I mean, with the defense that the Jets have, this could be a very low-scoring game. And aside from that, this could be similar to the Super Bowl where Deebo just gets locked up. I mean, he's going to need some touchdowns to come through for you in fantasy. If I got to choose one of these guys, I'm not starting to Deebo. And I'm a huge Deebo guy for fantasy. So,
Yeah, I think I'm with you 100% there. A lot of question marks. Like we haven't even seen this 49ers offense play together all this offseason. Like Trent's been out. He just got back in the building this week. We just got Christian McCaffrey back from injury as well, who's been sitting out most of the preseason. Brandon Ayuk's back in town as well. And yeah, I'm never going to actively want to play people against that New York Jets secondary with Sauce Gardner and the boys out there. So I think I am with you on that. I think I would bench Debo here. And yeah, what do you think, Steve? Are you also benching Debo as a consensus from us?
So here's the thing with Debo Samuel, right, that you want to remember is you're right, Seth. You're 1,000% right. Christian McCaffrey hasn't been there. Trent Williams hasn't been there. Brandon Ayuk hasn't been there. You know who's been there? Debo.
True.
He's been there.
True.
He's been there. And someone's got to manufacture touches, right? And I think against this Jets secondary, it's pretty much a no-fly zone. You're going to have to manufacture touches. Christian McCaffrey's going to be eased back into the offense off that calf injury. Who is the backup running back right now with the injury to Elijah Mitchell? It's
Jordan
probably it's Jordan Mason technically, but it's probably Debo Samuel. So I'm not benching Debo Samuel in that game. I'm benching Mike Evans, honest and truthfully. I think with a new coordinator in there, he's a year older, he's a year slower, and Baker Mayfield's still his quarterback. And I know that it looked decent last year, but it was touchdown dependent. And I can't get behind someone that touchdown dependent all the time over guys that are going to get the target share or the opportunity that these other guys are going to get. I think Mike Evans is the guy to bench this week out of those four.
Fair point. Fair point with Dave Canales moving out of the Tampa Bay system down there. Steve, I appreciate the counter insight there from you as well. Here's one from our guy, Jorge. What's up, gentlemen? Should I drop Chase Brown for Brian Robinson and lose my number one waiver priority 10-team PPR league? Robinson was dropped for Corum. Thank you. Wow. Holy cow. I've not played in a lot of 10-team leagues in a while that Chase Brown or Brian Robinson could be out there. But still, man, I will say from a season-long perspective, I have Brian Robinson a good bit higher than Chase Brown in my ranks. However, I am in the Chase Brown fan club as well, my friend Jorge. I'd love to, if you're still with us here live, I'd love to maybe hear some other options you have on your bench you could cut loose, maybe some receivers, because it's hard to get behind dropping a guy, Will, that had almost 300 touches at his senior year in Champaign, Illinois. You're a Big Ten guy. You can remember that. So I do like Chase Brown. I think he will be the more explosive back here in Cincinnati, but I love B-Rob as well, and I know you do as well, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me who I prefer, I prefer Brian Robinson, but I think they're in kind of the same tier. A whole lot of uncertainty with both of them. I'm confident that Brian Robinson is going to be the guy here. But I think that week one waiver priority might be more important than deciding between two guys outside of the top 24 running backs.
It's a great point. Steve, would you be willing to lose that number one priority spot here to grab Brian Robinson over Chase Brown? Or is it kind of like Will said, they're kind of in that same tier? Maybe do we just let it ride and come back a week from now?
No, you drop Chase Brown for Brian Robinson right now, because think of it this way, right? If you looked at the waiver priority next week, it starts up and Brian Robinson's there. Brian Robinson's on the waiver wire, right? Pretend he wasn't there right now, or you didn't really think about him. You would 1,000% be throwing like 90% of your fab at him, right? Like you absolutely want to pick him up now. I mean, why wait?
Jorge's saying, Jorge, let us know who your wide receivers are, man. He's saying not really anyone else he could get rid of. Chase Brown, he does have Christian Watson. If this is a 10-team league, like I do like Christian Watson a hell of a lot. He has a ton of upside, but you would have that roster flexibility heading into the weekend here, Will. Would you drop Watson over Brown for Robinson, or do you think you want to clutch your pearls there with the talented 30-year wide receiver for the Packers?
I would hold on to the upside for Christian Watson. In my opinion, I like Christian Watson as a prospect. I think he's shown a ton of upside. The thing is, I was just going to say Chase Brown, crowded, Zach Moss. We don't really know what's going on there. Watson's crowded too. I think Watson's got to go a couple of rounds before Chase Brown. I would much rather have Christian Watson.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. These loaded teams like this. I mean, I'll say either way, Jorge, I think you're very set, man. But yeah, so it seems like we're a little bit split here. Steve is saying that he would actively pursue Brian Robinson here on the waiver wire ahead of things, and then potentially, drop Chase Brown there, and Will's kind of the other way, stay packed, and maybe I'm the same if I have that number one priority. Keep that in your back pocket. He does have loaded wide receivers though here, Will. Justin Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Rice, Thomas Jr. Yeah, like when are you ever gonna play Christian Watson? You know what I mean? Like you'd have to have one of those guys on bye. Like I think I would drop Watson for B-Rob. I'm gonna be honest. I'd rather have B-Rob than Watson. And
I would rather why Chase Brown? Like Chase Brown had a negative yards like above expected. Like in terms of expected rushing yards, he was negative. Like Chase Brown has never shown it. He's never shown to be productive. He couldn't win the starting job.
He had like
he couldn't win the starting job
season
against Zach Moss, and Zach Moss isn't good either. Like this is not a situation that you want to be in. And listen, it's the Bengals. If Joe Mixon couldn't succeed there, Chase Brown isn't succeeding there. Like this is not a guy that's going to get a lot of touches. He's just not that kind of player.
Yeah.
Brian Robinson, at least you know that this like he has a role. He's a starting running back on the waiver wire for a offense that is probably going to be much improved this year. Why on earth would you let that sit?
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're mixed here. I'm sorry, Jorge. We are mixed here. We can't get to a consensus, but I think if you want to drop Chase Brown, if you want to drop Christian Watson for Brian Robinson, you're not going to look back and feel stupid. But at the same time, if you want to save that number one priority, no one would blame you either. Great question, though. We appreciate the thought process. Here from George. Hey, guys, can you rate my team? 12-team non-PPR. Ooh, non-PPR. I haven't played that in a while. Excuse me. Kyler Murray, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, George Kittle at his flex. He's got Javonte Williams on his bench. He's got Kirk Cousins, Brian Robinson, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Zay Flowers, Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr. How do you feel about this, Will? This feels like a very loaded team. I love having Barkley and Gibbs, two RB1s. I love having DJ Moore and Waddle, two wide receiver, back end wide receiver ones, high end wide receiver twos for me. And then he's got a ton of upside on the bench. Trey Benson, Blake Corum, B-Rob. I really like this, honestly. Again, I haven't played a ton of non-PPR in the last 2 to 3 years personally. And you got Kyler Murray. I'd give this a 9. What would you give it, Will?
I really like Kyler, DJ Moore, Waddle, Kittle, Javonte, and a couple of those guys on the bench. Once again, I haven't played non-PPR for probably 3 or 4 years. Been a while. I feel like Gibbs is a weird pick for non-PPR.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
And honestly, Saquon, I think a lot of production from those two, more Gibbs obviously, is in the receiving. So that part's a little weird, but I would say this is a pretty solid team. I like everyone else outside of those two.
What number? Give it a number, Will.
We're gonna go 8.5.
Okay, 8.5. Steve, what's your number here for a guy George play?
So it's not PPR, and I gotta agree with you guys. I don't think Barkley's gonna get the same kind of totes that he got in New York, and Jahmyr Gibbs isn't gonna get like the 25 carries that you need for it to really add up. I think you lose in those points. I don't love Javonte. I don't really like. Yeah, I don't really.
Honestly, I said I love Javonte, but part of that was because of the receiving upside, which isn't going to matter here. So
right, it's not that it doesn't matter because you obviously get points.
Yeah.
For receiving yards, but like losing those points on PPR, you do lose something.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm harsh. I like it. I think it's good. I think it's solid. It's 7.5. Like okay. 7.5.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Split the diff 7.25.
Yeah, great to see George back in the chat. He usually pops in every September. We start seeing George around again. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you had a great summer. And Horace, hey, saying first time here, super solid advice, and I subscribe. Thank you, Jorge. We appreciate that, man. That goes a long way to continue to help us grow over here at IBT. So thank you so much. If you guys do enjoy this type of content, follow Jorge's lead, subscribe to the channel, help us out, give us a thumbs up as well in this video if you enjoyed it. And let's go ahead and get to our question of the week here from the FF Advice Network. Which quarterback coming back has a better season, Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers? This coming from our guy Wishlist. What do you think here, Steve? Man, I'm very like I've been in the Aaron Rodgers camp for a long time. I've kind of been the one having to defend him for a long time from both a fantasy perspective and a real life perspective. So I don't want to get into that rant here, but just from a pure fantasy perspective, gun to the head, who has a better season here, Kirk Dizzler or old Aaron Rodgers, ayahuasca man himself?
Probably Aaron Rodgers, just because the injury's older. That's the reality of it, right? Kirk Cousins is kind of fresher off that injury. Probably doesn't have the goods in his system to make that pain go away quite as fast. Listen, Aaron's a different kind of cat, right? Like let's just put it that way. And they both ruptured an Achilles. Neither of them has ever really relied on their speed in the first place. So if you're asking me which quarterback is able to just sling the ball better, it's a guy who's always been able to sling the ball better, and that's A-Rod. Like, that's Aaron Rodgers.
I think the only thing from a fantasy perspective I'd be concerned about Rodgers a little bit, Will, Nathaniel Hackett, notoriously slow fucking pace offense. I mean, I remember even when they were the cream of the crop, one of the best teams in the NFL, they never ran a ton of plays, always in bottom of the barrel for pace, and the Jets have this loaded defense with or without Hassan Reddick. So I think gun to the head, I would take Cousins here, but I don't love either one, and I don't want to rely on either one of them for fantasy here. There's so many more options inside the top 15 I'd rather have. In 2-quarterback league, I could get around one of them, but just miss me on both right now. Yourself, Will?
Yeah, I mean, this not the biggest on either one, especially the tier. Like, I think there's so much more upside with other guys in this tier, like Stafford, especially. Even Deshaun Watson, that's another conversation.
True.
But, yeah, I mean, they're both older guys coming off injuries, but, haven't been rushers. What I would say is it comes down to what I was going to say what you said with the offense. It's going to be a lot slower pace for Aaron Rodgers, especially with an elite defense. And I love Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. They both deserve to go where they go in drafts, and they're going to be amazing. On Kirk Cousins' side, I think having Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney gets super overlooked, and Bijan Robinson in the Zach Robinson offense. I would say the reasoning for me picking Cousins here, outside of him being, QB7 in points per game in a different situation last year, I would bet on the Zach Robinson offense over the Nathaniel Hackett slow-paced 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, because I think their talent that they have around them is kind of similar. So
Sure.
They both only have one wide receiver. That's rough.
Yeah, but at least Cousins has Pitts though too, which I would take over.
That's what I was talking about.
And Bijan.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Too, I guess,
yeah. Take it easy over there. Guys, this has been very fun. Will, I know you got a lot of stuff happening over there at your channel as well, man. Feel free to plug away, man. Where can everyone find you and best support you as the season unfolds here?
Yeah, primarily my name and then NFL on TikTok, but more importantly, Fantasy Fortune on Instagram. We've been putting out between 3 to 4 videos per day, and it should stay the same there. Fantasy football and betting advice there.
Oh yeah, well, we appreciate it. Steve, you and I are working on some back end things over here at IBT soon. I keep teasing it, but soon we'll have
so close.
Yes, we'll have an announcement for that soon. You can find him on Twitter at Steve_Lawson93. You can find me on Twitter at @between_SethFF. Kyle, thank you for your help in the back end. Easiest way you can support us here. Check out the website, inbetweenmedia.com. We got a bunch of great fantasy football, NFL, college betting content coming for you. Of course, NASCAR is still rolling along the track as well this fall, PGA season in the swing seasons, but we'll be back here in just a couple of weeks as well. So make sure you guys are plugged in here on the channel, on the website, everything we have going on. He's Will Starlipper. He's Steve Lawson. I'm Seth Wilcock. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Keep it in between till next time. Thank y'all.